Any questions?
Going back to the first lockdown, I found it quite comforting in a way, and important that the first lockdown coincided very closely with Lent, and it probably made it more difficult for us than maybe some of us were planning, which could have been a good thing for some of us, quite edifying, and also to be kept away from the liturgy for a period of time. I also found to be, in a way, quite helpful over Lent, and I thought about how St. Mary of Egypt went into the desert, and she was away from communion in the liturgy for 40 years, and it's like, if she can do it, we should be able to strive to do it once. And I was just thinking, how was she still in communion in a way if she was away from every other human being for such a long period of time? She still prayed. She was very holy
for the world.
In
praying for the world, if you're pouring out yourself and your soul to pray for the world, which is the role of the monk. It's not what we're all called.
No.
But the role of the monk is to pray for the world.
Yeah.
So we're sleeping when there are monks around the world praying the whole time for us, and that's how they keep in communion with the world. So it's a different calling.
Yeah.
I remember that lockdown. We had that. We were like the early monks who went out into the desert and returned for Easter, except we couldn't return for Easter because it was still closed. But yeah.
And it was that something that is more, well, it must be more achievable for someone of like such a great level of holiness, because for some of us we felt like, okay, we need to watch it online, but that's participatory. It's observing it rather than participating in it.
But that's a start. I mean, it's not it's not the wrong thing for people to do that. If that gives them the connection with the church, it's this. If you think that's a replacement for coming to church or living your life in communion with others, oh look, I've seen a lovely liturgy. Wasn't it beautiful? You could go on the internet and you could see what every church was doing. Oh, they've got a lovely choir in that church. That's lovely. It's like a theatre show. But if then in my next breath, the people I'm stuck in with lockdown who might rub me up the wrong way and might annoy me, and if I'm not treating them like people made in the image of God, if you do not see Christ in everyone you encounter and everyone you meet, well, what's the point of watching a liturgy? But you might as well go to the theatre.
Yeah, of course. But really, even if you do turn up physically into a church building and are there physically and participate and actually take communion and everything, you still have the same danger of just turning around and going, oh, you're annoying.
Precisely. We're fallen human beings and we do that. But then our striving is, how do we live our life so that the whole time we have this communion with God and with others? Is it the practice of prayer, not your 15 minutes of prayer, but we're told to pray without ceasing, to do Jesus' prayer. Father talked about reading the Bible. Well, it's a Western tradition, Lectio, where you take the Bible, Lectio Divina, you take the Bible, you read it slowly. And the Bible was designed to be read aloud. It wasn't a book to be studied. You read the words of it. Someone's quite poetic. I know that some of the very pious people in Greece, they always read aloud the Bible to each other, pious families. They have the tradition of hearing the Bible, it's to be heard. And if you read the words, I think you should always read the Bible aloud, not like an intellectual. Read the words, and then what this system of lectio, and you might want to look at it in another, when you do that conference on scripture that Father suggested, you read in the words, you drink in words. It's like having a meal. You you take the starter, you read it, and then you take the bit you like, the morsel, and you start chewing on it over and over. So when you read a passage, it could be you decide to follow a whole book of the Bible over the course of a period. This was a very good period to read the book of Acts. But you might say, I want to read the Gospel of Mark because it's the shortest. but it's also quite poetic. It's got a structure that people can learn the whole Gospel of Mark, for example, out loud. And you find as you're reading, there's a phrase that speaks to you, that speaks to your heart. And you take that phrase. I mean, this is where the Jesus prayer and others come from reading the Psalms, these arrow prayers. And you take that phrase and you take it with you through the day. So when you've read your Bible in the morning, before you go to work and you get on that bus and you have to deal with your manager being annoying or whatever, you've got that phrase in you to carry you through the day. And that's one of the things that could be done. The spirit and discipline of fasting is not an end in itself, it's to bring in communion. So when we fast, what we do, have you thought, you know what, I'm going to fast, and you could do, now people do this intermittent fasting, isn't it? It's a thing, yeah? You can see I haven't tried it. Now the traditional, when I saw about it, look at those wise monks. In our church we have a very balanced, these are the days we sort of basically go vegan, and nowadays we look at the planet and the environment, we're ahead. But also in the monasteries, fasting, especially in Lent, on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, you keep the fast of the 9th hour. That means you don't eat until 3 p.m. So you miss 1 or 2 meals, you have 1 meal in Lent. In the monasteries they only have 1 meal in Lent, if they're able, obviously the elderly and infirm, maybe not so. What about your other 2 meals? You won't spend the money for those other 2 meals. Have you thought you could give that to the food bank or to the charity? And as churches, do we take that mission into the world? I've been striving for this for many years in my parish, and now they've organised it, and I'm unable to help so much because of other time commitments. We have a food bank. What could you do in your parish to help? And it's open to the whole community. We're not Christians hidden away. We show our love to the world. Every Saturday we have people line up and we get fresh produce in as well. People donate the biggest thing, their time. And we can see people more and more hungry. That's a small thing we do. You probably know more about it, Andy. But there's other things we can do. Have we ever gone with our church group, with our youth, and cleared up the local river? We say that we believe in the holiness of the whole of creation. We read these high words. Oh, look, we're very ecological, the Orthodox, but are we? Are we using polystyrene cups in our parish, or are we using recyclable? Do we really do what we're meant to do? We can start with small things to show our love for God, love for others, and love for creation. And I want you to go away and think about, when I go back to my community, as well as living out my life, what are we doing with my brothers and sisters in the church to show our witness to the world? It could be a simple thing, is we go and take the children to sing at the old people's home at Christmas. Now that's showing to the world. It could be small things. It could be we're going to go and clean the street. The streets are rubbish around here. We're going to clean the streets. There's no place for, we did this once, we had the young people of all different faiths, had nowhere to go. And we had a hall. We opened the hall. Come here and play ping pong. Why don't we do those things? What are we scared of? How can we be scared? There's 3 things that motivate the human being. We want to be rewarded. We get a carrot or a stick. We can be motivated by fear, or we can be motivated by love. And if you read the Father's Sacrament, love is the highest one. It's love of God and love of our neighbour. What are we scared of? We have a Christ who battened down the doors of hell and brought us eternal life, and we have that life. We are called as Christians to share that life with the world. We can't hide in our museum. We have to be a living presence of the body of Christ and then take that into the world. Question?
So, I was going to add to the food bank thing, because obviously I help with my church's food bank. So what I was going to say is that, I see the amount of effort that people put in, and I help as well. So, you have some really, really desperate people who come, and they would quite literally starve to death if we didn't give them any food. There's a lady who I've been delivering to. I randomly found this message on Facebook from this lady saying, "Please help me, please bring me food," and I still deliver food to her now. And one thing I did, and I don't say this because I want praise from everyone, I do this because I want you to think about, I'd like you to think about this. When it came to Christmas, her kids didn't have any toys for Christmas. I went and got her kids some toys, so at least on Christmas Day, they could open some toys. Now, the reason I mention that is not, as I said, not so you can say, oh, he's such a wonderful person. I didn't do that to get any praise from anyone. I don't care about the praise from anyone. It's the fact that that made such a big difference to the lives of the women in that family.
I remember I got a call, Christmas Eve, I got a call from one of my Anglican colleagues, and she said, Minnie, you're involved with the church. Do you know anyone who can take 100 turkeys, fresh turkeys? 100. And I phoned up at Presbyterian, I said, Presbyterian, have we got space for it? She goes, we've got a freezer, but who can go? It's like 10:30 at night. It was an Anglican vicar over at the other side of London, South African guy. I rang him, he was so joyful. He said, I went into his church, he said, hallelujah, and I've got a small, if you say, I've got a small Skoda. And he filled it with as much as it could take. He wouldn't drive, so the wheels were coming at the front. It was a very rainy night, and we just left it overnight. It was cold outside the church, and the next morning we put them all in the freezers. We fed 60 families. These were Waitrose turkeys that go for, £60. It seems like we get supermarkets, doesn't it? But these are small things that we can do. It doesn't have to be a food bank, but sitting in your communities, what can you do, both to live your life as Christians, both in your everyday interactions with people. So like the servant of St. Ahmed, I'll come to you, you live that life, but in a way that in your church, in your community, show that witness to the world. Yes?
So, in the ecological question,
Yeah.
this might sound a bit cynical, and I don't kind of think this, but some Christians do say, what is the point of caring for the environment if God is going to recreate the world? Is it just because we're stewards?
I'm going to let Father answer that one.
There are so-called Christians who live for the destruction of the world. And during the lockdown, I had to deal with one who's fortunately a former parishioner, who was in effect rallying for Antichrist, because he concluded COVID-19 doesn't exist. This is all the plot of about 5 Jews who live in New York City, and this is to usher in the victory of Antichrist. And I said, well, what about Christ? And he said, he didn't really have an answer, because he was so focusing all of his own anxieties into this picture of the destruction of the world. The world doesn't matter. Ultimately, therefore, the creator of the world doesn't matter. You can burn the icon. Why dust the icon off if it's going to be burned anyway? This is a very old heresy. Aspects of ancient Montanism had it. Aspects of Gnosticism had it. From the 1st century, there were all these people who looked to Christianity as a means of escape. And if there's one thing that all 3 talks thus far have had in common, is that we're saying that Christianity is not about escape. We care for the world not as an end in itself, any more than we give to the beggar because he's an end in itself, or as some atheists said to be, because he's a fellow human being. What does a fellow human being mean? What does that actually mean? A fellow life form? Is he a sophisticated chimpanzee? Or is he the icon of God? So if the world is the icon of God, can you call yourself Orthodox if you go and slash up an icon? If you urinate on an icon? If you desecrate an icon? I don't say that the focus of the Orthodox Church should be social care or ecology, but it's part of a larger picture of how we view reality. The fundamental difference between us and, in different degrees, heterodoxy or unbelief is the way we view reality itself. That includes the way we view ourselves in reality. We don't sort of, when is Christ going to come back and zap the enemy? Because that's basically what you have under these pseudo-Christianities to say, well, the world's going to be destroyed anyway, and the few of us who know the names of the 5 Jews in New York City are all going to be raptured up into the sky, and that's not Christianity. And it was condemned at least as early as St. Irenaeus. There's references to in St. Ignatius. There has always been people who have used Christianity as a way of opting out of responsibility. And plenty of our own people, our own Orthodox people, to this day, echoing some other things that Marina just said, very almost as dramatically as I at 5 points, who go to church in order to forget that anyone suffers. They go to church in order to ignore the beggar and pretend that children aren't born with meningitis and that old people don't get Alzheimer's. They fortify the Marxist argument against Christianity by their motive in going to church. And anyone who says that the creation of God doesn't matter is in league with them. This is not Christianity. Christ comes to create a better world, not in order to destroy the work of his hands, but to destroy what is already dead and replace it with what is alive.
I mean, I think there's also this tendency, it's a tangent. When I worked with the writings and the people who were spiritual, St. Porphyrios quite strongly, I'll come to you, quite strongly says, why are these people looking for the devil everywhere? Why are they looking for the Antichrist everywhere? Why? Look to Christ.
Yeah.
Find Christ in the world, find Christ in the beggar, find Christ in your neighbour, find Christ in creation. If you see Christ everywhere, what is the rest? What's going to happen to you if you cling to Christ? I remember my first spiritual father, Raphael Noiter, he said, you should cling to the hem of the garment of Christ. You should see Christ in everything. And if you do that, what's going to harm you? Principalities or powers or nothing. Because we have a Christ who's risen from the dead, who's trampled down death by death, who's brought this resurrection, this life, who has beaten Hades, death, where is thy sting? Hades, where is thy victory? I remember another time, when I was your age, we had a conference in Father Raphael with young people. And at that time, Chernobyl had just happened. I think it was 1990, something like that. We had our first room. We had that in 1980. I think this was earlier. So it was just after Chernobyl. Everyone was talking about it. And when did Ceausescu fall? So we had to. Romanians for the first time we were allowed to come, and they had been come to the West, and they saw butter and they put it on their plate like it was ice cream. This is not. And people were talking about this. And everyone was talking about the apocalypse, the 666, the end of the time, there were conspiracies everywhere. And I was a teenager, you know, and I took myself by a river, I took the Bible and I read the apocalypse, beginning to end. One afternoon I read it. And then I went to my Father Raphael. I said, Father, forgive me, I read the apocalypse, I didn't take the blessing, but I ran on, you know, because it's not in the thing we read in the church. I read it. I just sat and read it now. He said, and what did you think? I said, well, Christ wins.
Yeah.
Christ wins. And he said, that's it. That's it. And if we remember that Christ wins, if God is with us, who can be against us, then what do we lose? Yes, young man, sorry. Oh, have you remembered your question now? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Before I found Christianity, veganism was a big part of how I found ethics. And I was just thinking about that with regards to how industrial farming is quite horrible for the animals involved. My moral framework is now Christian, but I still think a lot about how animal products are produced, and I don't know whether that should be thought about more in
I think it certainly should be. I think once upon, I apologise if I misgendered you. I mean, look at our church, we regard our church, we keep these fasting rules still. We have a balance. And there's even more of a balance. But can a priest be a butcher?
No.
No. We have a tradition where the monastics don't eat meat. They can't kill any living things. So we have that within our liturgy. Obviously, we live in a fallen world. We need our protein. It's an easy way, especially for poor people, to have these things. But I think there's an argument. Certainly, we've become, again, it's one of those things where we've become divorced from nature. I mean, there's a story, we had a priest from Cyprus many years ago, a young priest, Basilos, with his family, and his young daughter had spent most of her young life in England. And they went on holiday back to Cyprus, and the child is going with the grandmother. She said, come on, let's go and feed the chickens. And she looked up and said, chickens? Yeah. Chickens, what you get in the meat in the supermarket. What's a chicken? Because we've become divorced from that reality. My grandmother's age, they didn't eat meat every day. Meat was for a festival, for a feast. If you're going to kill an animal that you've looked after it for 3 years, your goat, your sheep, you're going to have it Pascha. It's not going to be something that you casually, I saw, if you see industrial farming, it's absolutely horrific. When I lived in the Netherlands, there were these cows that couldn't stand on their own legs. Such were they beefed up so much for meat, they become divorced from what they are. So I think as a minimum, we eat less anyway, but when we do eat meat, yes, look at the ethics behind it. You may be interested, there's an organisation, I'll put you in touch, called Orthodox Concern for Animals. You might like to get involved in that. And it's something we could look at. It doesn't mean we're all meant to be vegans or whatever, but then think about where do we get that from? In the villages in Cyprus, you ate a big animal, and the butcher in the village, he would say, sorry, I haven't got enough orders, I'm not going to kill that cow unless everybody orders the meat. So it was only a big feast. And you'd even, your chicken occasionally, you'd use it more for eggs. And some others you would order. I'll tell you at dinner an apocryphal tale about the rabbit that wasn't a rabbit that was served to the English governor. But that would be another time. But it's these things were done. Nowadays people eat meat every day. Why? Why do we need to eat meat every day? Do we, can we limit it to a minimum? Just on a Sunday and then your leftovers. That's what people did. Big feasts. And our church has that, I think, and we've lost that. Somehow we lost that in our industrialised. We're divorced. The little child doesn't know what a chicken is. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. But yeah.
Okay. We've got time for one more quick question. Very quick question. About a couple of minutes.
My big question is, what are you going to do? Think about, when I go home, talk with your friends if they're from your parish here, when I go back, how am I'm not just going to go to church, church is giving me something, that's not what church is about. We give to God, and God gives to us. We give him the bread and the wine, and he gives us his body and blood, but he gives us that so that we can then go in the world and give that to the world. And do we do that bit, or do we fall short? And I think, myself, if I speak for myself, I fall short. So, what do we do about it?